Anytime. There we go. What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, where me and my good friend rocking the Grimlock hoodie over there that looks like Jurassic Park is my friend Brian. Brian, I love that fucking hoodie.
I do too, to the point where I need to get a bigger size because it's a little small these days.
It's a little snug. Okay.
So I need to buy a new one.
Did you in your mind say, okay, we're doing a show today that features robots, so I have to have a robot shirt on?
It might have. I it's funny. I was looking for I have a Terminator 2 and Trogdor mashup T-shirt that I probably wore on the show at some point. I was looking for that. I couldn't find it, but even though it's the summer here still. I mean, it's a little cooler, but it's not like fall yet quite. I wear hoodies all summer because I'm in my office downstairs. It's just fucking cold.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's surprisingly cool in Texas too right now. It's like 80 something or maybe like 90, and it should really be like closer to 100 right now. So
that's cool.
Yeah. It's miserable from like June to like almost October, and then it's nice for the rest of the time.
Okay.
Yes, but here, let me segue out of that. It's not as bad as a nuclear blast that obliterates everyone on Judgment Day.
I imagine that would be a lot hotter. Yes.
Yes, and we've seen some examples of that in this show that we're about to talk about today. Terminator Zero, the anime that is now on Netflix.
The show that Pete couldn't remember for 2 months.
Yes, but I am really glad that you remembered it because it's pretty fucking great.
Yes, I'm loving what I've seen so far. I feel like just overall, we've never covered an anime before. We've covered some animated stuff, but not an anime, I guess. And right. I don't know even where this falls these days on what is actually considered anime, and it is a Netflix thing. So, I guess it sort of is. It looks like it. If it looks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck, I guess.
A Japanese duck, yes.
Yes.
So, well, here's the thing, right? I think that it is an anime. I've seen it described as that. It's directed by Masashi Kudo.
Yep.
Yeah, who did Bleach. And then for me, when I watch it, it feels like it's something that they made in Japan and then dubbed in the United States. And that is kind of partially true.
That's always what happens with dubbings. They always will dub it for different countries in the native country, most likely. So it seems like it was. I don't know. I wish I knew about the animation company that did it because I couldn't find much about that. But that's like a big thing with anime is the animation company, and there's usually like a stylistic imprint to it depending on the company sometimes. Yeah. So it's interesting that I couldn't find that, but yes, it was written by Mattson Tomlin, and he's also the showrunner, I believe. And I also saw that there was some input from James Cameron and Galen Hurd.
Yeah.
As well,
right?
But
and I think
imagine more so with Mattson Tomlin here.
Yeah, and I think that Matt Reeves is one of the producers too.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay,
I think I saw it in the credits. But Matt Reeves worked with Mattson Tomlin on the Batman. Mattson Tomlin, I think he's got some kind of connection to Blade Runner as well. I should have done more research into him, but I always think of him and the Batman. He worked on this, and then basically like he developed the show, and then I think they basically took it to Japan, and this studio made it into an anime. Then when they brought it back to the United States, he redid the dialogue to dub it in English. I think that's what happened.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it feels like something that was made solely in Japan, and then they just like dubbed it in English, but it seems like it started here, went over there, came back. And I actually really, really appreciate the fact that it feels like an anime, just straight from Japan.
Yes, but it also distinctly feels like Terminator 2. I feel like the show hits a lot of those nostalgic Terminator beats from the first two movies especially.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. And going on that, here's an interesting point, too, I found when I was doing a little research. Mattson Tomlin considers all the Terminator movies to be canon for this show.
Yes, that was an interesting thing. I mean, I feel like, the further you get along with time travel series, like the more convoluted it gets. And I never saw, is it Dark Fate? Was that the last one?
Yeah.
That's the only one I haven't seen.
Okay.
So I don't know if anything. I know they were kind of like, back in the sort of past again in that one, but not completely. So I don't know. I feel like everything I've seen so far mostly relates to just the first two.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is it okay if I kind of give you like light spoilers for Dark Fate?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So, Terminators, I would say even up to Terminator, what's the one with Christian Bale? Salvation, right?
Yep.
Those first four, I think, for the most part, are following the same kind of narrative. It's like this could essentially, they could all be connected, right? Then all of a sudden you get to Terminator Genesis, where they're implying that like Skynet is messing around with time travel even more, and it's like convoluting things, creating new timelines. With Dark Fate, so here's a bit of a spoiler, and I'm sorry to do this to you, but like the implication with Dark Fate is that the robots that are coming back now are from a different thing besides Skynet together. It's a new thing. I wish I remember the fucking name of what that new thing is, but they're just like Terminators, but it's like a new thing that's not Skynet. It's kind of like the Skynet apocalypse didn't happen. It's taken the form of something new now. And Linda Hamilton is in it, and her experience from Terminator 2 is the same, but like she's now living in this world where there's Terminators coming back, but they're from something else now.
Okay, so now I'm seeing the potential connective tissue to the show and some of the elements in it, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually here. So, should we get into just the show? You're talking any more of the creative stuff, or?
Well, I kind of wanted to know before we did that, like, how do you feel about the Terminator sequels after Terminator 2?
I feel like Terminator and Terminator 2 are like peak for the series. That's the stuff that I gravitate towards the most.
Right.
I like 3 well enough. I like Salvation well enough.
Right.
Genesis was Genesis.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen Dark Fate. And I know that there's been other like comic books and a lot of them, some of them even like franchise crossovers, things like that. I doubt those are considered canon or anything like that. I'm sure there's novels too that I've never read either.
There are novels, yes.
In terms of the movies, like 1 and 2 are Paramount, 3 and 4 are lesser tier, and Genesis is not so great.
Yeah. And remember, there actually was a Terminator show too called the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
No, I never finished that show. I started it and I never finished it because I think it was like one of those shows that kept bouncing around on like Friday nights on Fox.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I'm like, oh, this is the death slot, Maybe I shouldn't be too invested in this.
Yeah, I think at one point, like the lead singer of Garbage was like a T-1000.
Shirley Manson was a Terminator?
I'm pretty sure. You're going to have to look that up after we're done recording, but I'm pretty sure she was a character on the show and she was a Terminator. And there's like a famous scene where like she was a urinal, like in a men's room, and then she like turns into a Terminator and kills. I swear to God. Dude, there's crazy shit in this franchise. You spoke about comics before. There's an infamous Terminator versus RoboCop comic. And at one point, like John Connor gets killed, and like the RoboCop becomes like the John Connor for the Resistance.
Oh, yeah. That sounds awesome, actually.
Yeah, I think it might have been fucking written by Frank Miller too.
Interesting. One of the only ones I'm familiar with is actually, believe it or not, Transformers and Terminator.
Hell yeah.
Which probably had my favorite RC design of all time.
That's
she's
cool.
like this like Cadillac sort of thing, but it was really well done. But it's weird. It's like it ends on a very kind of like downer note.
Oh, okay. You can
but
spoil it for me. Go ahead.
Well, I don't remember it that well, but I remember like most of the Transformers ended up dying, and then there's like only a couple left, and on both sides, like both Autobots, and they're like, okay, I guess we're okay now because everybody we know is dead, so let's just join together and
oh wow,
fight Skynet, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like everybody died in that.
Okay, I kind of like tales like that. That's kind of like a what if thing,
Yeah.
I'll look that up, see if they have it for digital in my library too. But I mean, obviously they've done a lot of different stuff with Terminator. In this, it's like this idea that it's like the main guy in this has this idea that Judgment Day is going to come and he's trying to prevent it. That's kind of the main backbone of the show. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. I wanted to use your little RC segue because one of the main characters on this show is RC from Transformers Prime.
Yes. Yeah, and I it's funny. I did research on all these names. When I saw your notes, I'm like, oh, I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. And I'm like, oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really cool to see that there. I like her a lot. And I didn't even notice it. Hearing the voice for 2 full episodes because she's in it quite a bit.
Oh, she absolutely is. Yeah, Sumali Montano. So she was RC from Transformers Prime. That's actually my favorite version of RC. There's many different versions of RC. And she plays Misaki on this show, who, when you meet her, she's like the caretaker for this family. The mom is, dead at this point. And so the dad is like consumed with his work. He has this vision of the future and he's trying to prevent Judgment Day from happening. And, right off the bat, there's something off about her. And when you watch enough of this franchise, you start to think, well, is she a Terminator? One thing
that's my notes. I was writing notes as I was watching it, and I wrote notes like she's like staring at the mirror, and there's like she cut her finger open, she's staring at the ball. Like, oh, she's a Terminator, 100%.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and then like she mentions something from her past in like the first episode. She mentions like a fishing village, and the kid's like, "What village was it?" And then she, kind of just zones off. So it's almost like she has a gap in her memory. I was going to say though, we forgot to mention that we're just covering the first 2 episodes of Terminator Zero right now. We're doing these in installments. So, if you guys know stuff from future episodes, we don't, But let's talk a little bit more about the behind the scenes. So Timothy Oliphant is the Terminator. And within these first 2 episodes, he doesn't talk.
Nope.
But he's pretty creepy looking.
Yes, he is. Yeah. I would say, and I'm not sure. So that we see that there's the Terminator in the future at first.
Yeah.
And that Terminator does look different than the one that's sent back in time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the one I believe is I know that was Timothy Oliphant because I have watched a little bit further, but I don't think that's a spoiler.
Okay.
But he does not speak in the first 2 episodes, which is interesting.
They have like parallel timelines going on, and we'll go into that in a minute too. But it's not Arnold, it's like a totally different Terminator. And I think it kind of fits the anime aesthetic.
Yeah, I think it works. So there's something about anime that always kind of baffles my brain. Is that I can never tell for the most part, my brain can never really decide what like race or ethnicity characters are.
Right.
Everything's obviously they localize it a bit when they dub it and translate it. And I don't necessarily think the characters look, for most things, or maybe some things at least, they don't necessarily look Japanese or Eastern or European or anything like that. They just and I recently saw something that I can't tell if it was really serious or as a joke, but that most anime faces look more like cats than people.
That's pretty great.
That's been in my head lately. When I watch the show, I'm like, oh, they sort of do. I gotta see it.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about the show, though, is that it takes place in Japan. I think that we're in the future too. I think that's in Japan as well. And
yes, because we see that the tower that Malcolm works at. We see that in both timelines. So it's definitely both in Japan.
Right.
Which I guess my point there was that I don't know if that Terminator is he Asian?
Right.
Is he supposed to be Arnold, but this is a different voice?
I see what you're saying. No, I think that if he was supposed to be Arnold, like that version, I think it would look like Arnold.
Yeah,
to some extent. I think it could be safe to say that he might be like Caucasian looking. Like I think that everyone that has a Japanese name is Japanese. And one of the interesting things about this show is that the main character, I think his name is Malcolm Lee, he has like mixed race kids. Like he had like a Japanese wife, and so I'm assuming he's like African American. He's played by African American actor, yeah. And so he's got mixed race kids, and then his housekeeper is Japanese. the main girl, who is played by Sonoya Mizuno. So she, I think, is supposed to be like Asian as well. And then she's from like the future, the far future of 2022.
I had 2020 in mind, but
Oh,
yeah,
I think it's
close enough.
2022. I might be wrong though. But she's kind of like the Kyle Reese of the series.
Yeah, and you can definitely see you can see the dynamic between Malcolm and like Miles Dyson, I think, as well.
Same here. Yeah, agreed. So the opening sequence with her, she's in this like factory. There's a bunch of humans like strewn about the floor. This Terminator's just kind of walking through methodically, just mowing through them. Goes after her. What'd you think of that? Because that's pretty much the way the show opens.
Yeah, no, it was a great action sequence. I think they do show a variation of Judgment Day prior to that, or maybe it's after. I don't remember at this point. But we do see, maybe it's one of Malcolm's visions and it's after this. But yeah, no, it's a pretty good action sequence. We see a bunch of humans get mowed down by the Terminator, and then we have Aiko kind of, holding her own against it, and eventually she takes this. Did they show the blue device before she takes it out to kind of fend off the Terminator?
No, it's like she kind of like pulls it out of like her suit or whatever, and then she plugs it into his eye. And I wasn't really sure what that was, because later in the episode they reveal that it's basically just like data that was from Skynet.
Yeah, I was confused as to what if, like, where they got that from. Essentially, I assume that the mission they were on, that what they were doing was to acquire that, but I don't understand how it was able to kind of stun or reboot the Terminator there.
Right, exactly. Because I mean, he's
but
from
also,
Skynet.
Yeah, but it also gave them the information of what Skynet is doing. So I wonder if that's something we're supposed to gloss over, or if that's a point that we should be keeping an eye on that they want us to kind of forget about until they surprise us later.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that data is so valuable. They find out from that data that Skynet is planning to send a Terminator back in time for a mission, and they're able to like connect a time machine that they've assembled to like the time machine that Skynet has. Like they're able to use the same window of time to send her back. And I think that's a really interesting detail, because you always get little snippets of what the time travel looks like in the Terminator movies, but it's never like just dumped out in like true exposition, And so it's always very interesting, because it's like, well, why do they send a human back at the same time? Why don't they send a whole bunch of Terminators back? You always have all these questions. And I think that the movies do a decent job of explaining why they don't do certain things. Like one of the things that they say is like, I think it's in the first Terminator, that you can't send back inorganic material. That's why they don't have like guns and stuff when they go back in time.
Yep.
And so it also explains why everyone always shows up naked, right, in the past. But they show a pretty extended sequence of her getting sent back in time within the second episode.
Yes, that's basically opens the second episode. Yeah. So,
but before we go into any more details, let's just round off this cast. So we got Andre Holland. He's Malcolm Lee, the main guy we've been talking about. Yep. I actually thought that he was the guy that voices like the Watcher, and the guy that was
very similar. Yeah, I thought the same thing at first too. Yeah, Jeffrey Wright, but no.
I was just thinking, because like he's worked on Westworld, and then like he might know Mattson Tomlin from the Batman because he was Commissioner Gordon.
Very true.
Yeah, but no, he has a very similar voice. And then finally, Rosario Dawson. I didn't know this until I looked this up, but she's the AI that he's created.
Oh no, her voice I heard, and that's what got me starting to look at everybody. I'm like, oh shit, this is Rosario Dawson. Who was everybody else?
Yeah, and it's really exciting to see her, because it's like, oh, is she going to have the same mindset as Skynet? Is she going to like be against Skynet? That stuff is really juicy for me.
Yeah, I agree. The bulk of the scenes with Malcolm in these first two episodes, and I imagine later on as well, are him talking with this AI that he's created named Kokoro. And the implication here is that Well, first, before I get to that, I want to talk about the timing of when they send everybody back. So they're going back to 1997, and it's Judgment Day. Judgment Day is August 28th. I kind of love that the show dropped on that around that day.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Yeah. Oh no, or is Judgment Day the 29th? It's one of them. I don't remember. It is the 28th. It's like 2 a.m. 28th LA time or something like that. That's
Okay.
actual. Skynet comes online, launches the nukes, Armageddon.
Yeah.
So this takes place on the 29th in Japan, like 13 hours away from that. And I love that kind of time risk factor here, that he's created this other artificial intelligence here, and he thinks it could potentially stop Judgment Day, which, how does he know about this? I mean, we do see a vision of it. Is he from the future? But ultimately, we don't know yet how he knows about Judgment Day, but he's very sure it's going to happen. Whether or not he's from the future or he has some information from the future somehow, we don't know yet. But so he creates this artificial intelligence, and he's still kind of working on it down to the wire, trying to convince it to save humanity. And I find that the discussions that he and Cobra have are some of my favorite instances of this show so far.
Shit, yeah. Very existential, very like, is humanity worth saving? And what have you guys done with your history? Stuff that this series, the Terminator franchise, does touch upon, but they're like literally having a debate about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's crazy because like Judgment Day at this point is 27 years ago, our time. And then I think the time of Terminator, like the Kyle Reese time, I think is 2022 as well. So it's like we're now 2 years beyond the Kyle Reese time too in our regular world.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let's talk about what you have on the ticket there. Actually, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, what else is interesting is that like it's kind of like Blade Runner 2049. Like they acknowledge that in this fictional world, there's been advancements in science that we haven't reached yet in our world. But it's like, oh, well, this is like a different timeline. So in this 1997 setting, they have like robot servants walking around.
And of course, Japan would have the robot servants.
Yes. And they're kind of cool, even though they treat them like they're weirdos.
Yeah, they treat them like they're weirdos, but at the same time, there's this kind of they kind of feel like they're like prone to error, and they kind of lack compassion, which I guess would make sense for an early robotic artificial intelligence, if it even is that at this point. I really like the scene where there's like one of those robot helpers is like out walking a dog, and the dog's just like barking at it and whatever.
Yeah.
And then it like bites it and it runs off, and then it causes a car crash.
Right.
And then the robot just casually walks past this dead body in the car, just looking for the dog. It's like, oh, where are you, doggy? Where are you?
Yeah.
Doesn't forget about the dead dude.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It reminds me of I, Robot with Will Smith, which I don't think is a good movie, but one of the interesting concepts in that movie is like a robot would try to save the person that's most likely to live, or like the youngest person, and like let other people die. That's sort of like that very cold, methodical logic. I like that kind of stuff. And I like the idea of like robots being like servants and stuff like that before like a potential uprising, which we see in I, Robot. You never read the book Robopocalypse, did you, by any chance?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. I actually really love that, and I read its sequel too. I think it's called Robogenesis, but it's basically like a Terminator type robotic apocalypse, and it starts out in a very similar setting where like robots are among us, they're doing like our daily routines for us, and then they kind of like revolt,
Yeah, interesting.
And then I also think of the Animatrix too, and you saw that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the most disturbing sequences in that is like when it shows the robot uprising.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen the Animatrix, but yeah, I do remember that vaguely.
Yeah, because they do, like, humans do horrible stuff to some of the robots, and then the robots do horrible things to humans. And I was getting a very Animatrix vibe with that scene that you were talking about with the dog and the crashed car and the robot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, as far as the narrative goes, we know that the kids' moms have died, and we don't really know how she died. At one
Yeah.
point, go ahead.
No, you go.
The housekeeper brings home a robotic cat, like another example of a robot being part of the everyday life. And the dad's really angry, and you think, well, of course he's going to hate a robot cat because he's against Skynet. But then his daughter says it's not because it's a robot; it's because it's a cat. So
Yeah.
why do you think?
While that line's being said, you see the picture of the wife on the mantle behind it.
Yeah. So, like, what do you think is up with that?
I I think it has something to do with the wife's death, and the wife must really like cats, I guess, and maybe some trauma there. I'm not really sure, but yeah, it's a very ambiguous line. Like it's got to mean something later on there.
Yeah.
And we're introduced to the three kids there, and one of the kids, the older boy, Kento, seems to be a bit of a tinkerer, and which I thought was he seemed a little more prominent than the other two when I first glanced, but I think they're all pretty equally important here. But there was a conversation he had with his dad about how people just don't know how to do things like this anymore. Like they don't know how to take things apart and fix things. They just I thought that was a really nice little piece of fear-mongering advice.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting because, like, Kenta, I think it's Kenta, he obviously has his father's ability to, like, take things apart or work with robotics. He wants to take apart that cat at one point, and the sister doesn't want him to. It's really disturbing because it seems like he wants to, like, almost like dissect a living cat. That was kind of bothering me. But he has that obsession with robots, and it's just kind of interesting because his father, is worried about robots destroying humanity. And then I think it's also kind of implied that, like, his children might be like the John Connor type characters that'll lead the rebellion in the future. What do you think?
Potentially, yeah. Although to me, Kento seems he seems very cold towards the robots. I guess. I mean, they are robots. I guess
Yeah.
But he see, like, you can tell that the daughter and the younger boy are like, oh, it's a cat, it's a part of the family, even though they had it for like 30 seconds. And he's like, who gives a shit? Let's just take it apart and see how it works.
Right.
Nothing. He seems very like heartless, around thinking about it.
Yeah, he's very much into, like, taking things apart, because I think in the very first scene that we see him in, he's like taking apart their, like, microwave, and he, like, used it to make something too, right?
Yeah, and then his dad's like, oh, you gotta put that shit back together.
Yeah. See, Brian, it's like, if people might not understand the love that we have for robots, I think that you and I probably like some robots more than we like most people. Look, I mean, just looking at your background behind you. Yeah. Robots are, dear to our hearts. We care about some of them so much. So like when one of them gets fucked with, we get kind of upset. But then we can flip it on its head. We can talk about robots fucking people up. So back into the future, when we see Aiko, there's this really great fucking sequence where the Terminator that she dropped down this big well or down this tower comes back online, and it goes to chase her, and we see, like, through its eye that it's like hunting her, but then that, like, connects back to the Skynet tower, and it's like in a drone, and the drone flies by. I really liked that sequence a lot.
Yeah, I always like when they show the views from the Terminator, and essentially here the Terminator tracks the base down. That's how the episode ends, I believe, the first episode.
Well, he doesn't get into the base until the second episode.
Yeah, but you see him, like, approaching. You see that he's bound the base, and the very beginning of the next episode is him attacking the base.
Yeah, and well, right before that, though, right before the first episode ends, there's this really fucking awesome montage where, like, they're making the avatar for Kokoro.
Yep.
And they're, like, showing sort of like organic parts, but they're making this hologram of her. And then they're also, like, making a Terminator from scratch. So they're like kind of like parallel to each other. And we see
Yeah.
all these like naked bodies in these tubes, which I'm assuming are just other versions of Terminators, right?
Yeah, there's other Terminator waiting to come online or other shells or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that happens like right after the Terminator finds the base. Like, he sends a signal back to Skynet and they're making this Terminator that's going to go back in time. And then I guess the implication, especially once you watch that second episode, is that Skynet's trying to send a Terminator back to stop Lee from like whatever he's going to do.
Yes. It's early on. It's a little more unclear about who's trying to do what. But I mean, I imagine that because Malcolm is seemingly doing something very grand in scale, that it's got to be something to do with him. But yes, it seems the Terminator is after Malcolm, and Ico is also after Malcolm, or is that kind of stop? That I was confused there because she is looking for Malcolm. I'm not so. She seems to want to stop Malcolm. So there is some ambiguity on the goals here so far.
Right. Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking that like maybe Ico is from the Skynet future that's from like the original Terminator movies, and then what Malcolm creates is like the whatever the new thing is in Dark Fate. Like maybe Kokoro is the new thing.
Yeah. So it's almost like, I mean, I don't think they've explicitly said this, but it almost seems like it's potentially the reverse of Terminator here, where the Terminator is sent back to protect the creator of Kokoro, and Ico is sent back to stop him. So, the reverse of the original Terminator, really.
That'd be cool. And it's basically just fighting over who's going to like dominate the post-apocalyptic future.
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty hot. So Ico deals with some trauma too. There's this redheaded girl, and I think it's so ambiguous. You can't tell if it's her sister or her girlfriend.
I couldn't tell you. I wrote the same note down.
Yeah. Her name's Annie, and like it's also ambiguous as to what happens to Annie. Like the Terminator comes into their base, it's slaughtering everybody. It has a gun pointed right at Annie, and then right before Ico gets sent back in time, like we don't see if it pulls the trigger or not.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if we will see that future again or not, and what happens to those characters or not. But am I crazy, or did the Terminator walk in blasting guns to the like in that cadence?
No, you're not crazy. Yeah, okay. The shots were like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a really nice nostalgic touch, I think. I like when they do things like that. So
he's like, here's my brand. Just shooting them. What do you think about that fucking prophet too that was in the future?
The note I wrote before thinking through the time, I'm like, oh, is it some old lady? Maybe it's Sarah Connor, because I didn't realize what time it was, but it's obviously not. So what you were having the note there is probably the most interesting thing that stood out was it always had to be you.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to one of my favorite lines from Mass Effect, actually.
Nice.
There's a character named Mord that says his line was it had to be me, someone else might have gotten it wrong. So it kind of echoed that for me in a way. But they're sending Ico back to do whatever it is. We're not sure yet. If she's stopping or helping Malcolm, we don't know. Or maybe the kids, we don't know. And it was always her that had to be it, and we don't exactly know why yet either.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think she's implying that like she knows other people's fates, and for some reason Ico doesn't have a fate, right?
Yes, yeah.
So there's definitely
they call it the prophet. So yeah.
Well, there's definitely this implication that like some humans have this kind of like awareness or like almost like a psychic sense, and I'm not thinking that that's like a superpower. I'm thinking it's more like Terminators have like fucked with time so much. Terminators and the Resistance have fucked with time so much that maybe just a byproduct is that people kind of have dreams about Judgment Day and they like can kind of tell what's going to happen to certain people,
Yeah.
That's my take. Maybe.
Yeah, but ultimately we don't exactly know why, other than the fact that she can't see any kind of future or feel any kind of future thing there is because she went back in time.
Right. That's the simplest thing. But I actually really like that prophet lady. I hope we see some more of her. I got 2 more points left for you before we wrap this up. one other one is when the Terminator shows up in 1997 and they just like crash the car right into him. I really like that sequence.
Yeah, also very evocative of the first two Terminator movies with, trying to run the Terminator over.
Right. And to me, like, he's very gaunt. He's not big like Arnold. And he's got that, like, his eyes are kind of weird too, where they almost are going off to the side like that, like a wall-eyed thing. And I feel like that's a very anime kind of thing. When you have some kind of weird creature or something like posing as a human, it looks like that.
Yeah, it looks very inhuman. Yeah, they try to make it like kind of evoke some kind of creepy monster, even though it is meant to look human. Yeah.
Right. Hell yeah. So, I mean, I just really like the idea of the Terminator, and like he like grabs one guy by the neck and just one-handed breaks the guy's neck, one of the cops, and yeah. I really love that fucking sequence. She drops him off a fucking bridge with a truck at one point. Yeah.
And he gets up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So then go ahead.
I was going to say that what happens in this episode is one of the things we forgot to mention in the first was that the girl, Rika, I think her name was Rika, she left with the cat because she didn't want Kento to destroy it or whatever. So all the kids are out and they're going to some place that was like important to them and their mom.
Yeah.
So that at that point, Malcolm was at work and he actually leaves his work to go help Misaki find the children. Then they run into the Terminator and Aiko there. I really like the realization. I mean, it kind of makes Malcolm seem like a shitty dad here, but he's like, oh shit, there's a Terminator. That means what I'm doing is important. I'm going to abandon my children and go do this.
It is. Yeah. One of the things that the actor that plays Malcolm, I mean, probably the best thing about him is that he really conveys is like, this is the most fucking important thing. Don't bother me with anything else. Like, I'm trying to save the world,
Yeah.
And yeah, he does. He's just like, oh, this killing machine might go after my kids. You go get them. I'm going to go keep working on my project.
Yeah. And we already think that Misaki is a robot or a Terminator. So, and it's like he's leaving, the lives of his children with this thing that he's potentially trying to stop at the same time. So.
Yeah, but I don't think he knows that Misaki is.
I think he has to.
Really?
I think he has to. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Really?
Yeah, I mean, like it's man, I don't know. I think that if you're hiring someone to watch your kids, or maybe that the whole thing is that he wasn't paying attention to it because he's so focused on his work that he didn't really look into it. But I feel like that's such a coincidence that it just he just happens to mistakenly hire a robot person or pre-Terminator or whatever the heck it is to safeguard his children, and while he's trying to stop a Skynet copycat. So I feel like that he absolutely knows what Misaki is, and maybe even had a hand in creating her. From my that's my best guess anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that might lead credence to what you just said is that when he goes to leave Misaki in charge of his kids, like he's like, go after my kids, I'm going to go back to my office. He does say the words, I order you, Misaki. And that's very like John Connor saying to the Terminator, I order you. So, that's why I think she kind of takes it on as a mission.
Yeah, it's like giving her a new prime directive almost. Yeah.
Right. So I guess we'll see. I was under the impression there were 6 episodes of this show. There's 8, right?
There's 8, yes.
Okay, so we're just gonna do like 2 at a time, and then I guess we'll just do like for 4 weeks.
Yeah, sounds good. And we'll have some other things here and there too.
Yeah, because we got fucking Transformers coming out in like a week or 2.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, more robots.
Yep.
Wait, I keep talking over you today. What'd you say?
I said I was just yaying along there. Yeah.
Oh, nice, yeah. So I mean, we got that, and then I think like I know that we got like fucking Creature Commandos coming out in December, but there's more shit between now and
then. Yeah, I mean, I know I briefly mentioned. I know Agatha comes out soon.
Oh yeah,
I'm okay with whatever we want to do or not do.
Yeah, let's talk about that off air, and also people, you guys at home, you can tell us too, because Brian and I, we've kind of had this habit of essentially recording everything that we would potentially watch and talk about anything that kind of falls under the umbrellas of like Marvel and DC. But we're kind of finding more and more often that there's things that we're just kind of watching because we feel obligated to. And Agatha might have the potential to be one of those things.
Yeah, it might. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I probably will end up watching that show anyway.
Right.
But, if we don't want to cover that, that's fine with me.
Yeah. So you guys at home,
I would love to not watch Joker though.
Fuck yes. Okay, good. I'm glad you slid that in there too, because I don't want to watch Joker either. Yes. Nice. So you guys, if you leave a comment, I don't want you to be like, well, you got to watch Joker. But yeah, just let us know what you want us to cover. We actually really love y'all's feedback, and especially if there's like a specific show that we're covering that you're into. But yeah, we're gonna just cover Terminator 2 episodes at a time for the next few weeks, and we'll sneak in some Transformers too. So there's no fate but what we make, but let's make sure you guys are fated to be here next